Now, to go one more step and improve our MyPad World app for the iPad, we can add a tap recognizer to the view so that with a tap, it brings up the modal view for changing settings. That way, although you can always tap the info button, you don't really need to. It's just to demonstrate how easy it is to add such a gesture. We'll also add a swipe gesture to recognize right and left swipes, and we'll use that to increase or reduce the speed of the animation. So here we are with MyPad World, and we're going to add the gesture recognizing code to the view controller for the animated view. And that means the files are MyPad World View Controller header file and MyPad World View Controller implementation file. We don't have to do anything with the nib file. This is what the view looks like, by the way. You'll recall with the I button. So what we're going to do is add a tap and a swipe. So we go back to the header file. Well, first we need to declare the UI gesture recognizer delegate, and we do that by putting it in here next to the settings view controller delegate, followed by a comma, and we type UI gesture, and there it is. Now the method we're going to inherit here is add gestures, so we want to put that in as well down here, following the other method declarations. It also returns void add gestures. Okay, so now we need to go over to the implementation file, MyPad World View Controller M. Now what's interesting is that immediately upon opening the .m implementation file, we see a warning. And that warning says incomplete implementation. And if we click on it, it jumps us back to the header file and it shows us that the add gestures method definition is not found. We've declared it, but we haven't put it in yet. So that's a clue about what we're going to do next. So now we're going to jump back to the implementation file here and ignore that warning for a few minutes while we put in our code. The first place we want to jump to in this implementation file, we can use the jump menu, is go to the viewDidLoad method in the view lifecycle section. And here it is. Of course, we worked on this quite a bit before, but now we're going to add to the very bottom self add gestures. And what we're doing here is putting the gestures into the view, although we haven't yet defined the add gestures method yet. So that's our next stop. And for that, we're going to jump right to our control section. Control. And below controls, at the very end, we're going to put another pragma mark statement to mark our gesture section, responding to gestures. And as you'll see, responding to gestures shows up right here. So we can get back to it whenever we need to. So here we're going to define add gestures. Void add gestures. With a bracket, hit return. It creates our end bracket for us. We want to create and configure the gesture recognizers and add each to the view as a gesture recognizer. So we're going to do UI gesture recognizer. And we want to create a tap recognizer and add it to the view. Recognizer UI tap gesture recognizer, and we're allocating that. Init with target self, action at selector, handle tap from, which is what we're going to provide. We add that to the view, and its delegate is itself. So what we're doing here is initializing a tap recognizer and adding it to the view using the add gesture recognizer instance method. That's part of UI gesture recognizer. The UI tap gesture recognizer is a subclass of UI gesture recognizer. It looks for a single or multiple taps. Now we're going to release recognizer. Moving along, we'll put in a space and add the swipe recognizer. Now we just put in a space here so that we can add a swipe gesture recognizer to recognize swiping to the right. So again, we'll start with recognizer. Now you notice that we're keeping a reference to recognizer. As you see, we'll be using it in another method called gesture recognizer should receive touch. So our recognizer here, UI swipe gesture recognizer, alloc for allocate, and init initialize with the target self, action at selector, and the message will be handle swipe from. And of course, we're going to supply handle swipe from. Now for the right swipe gesture, which is the default, we don't have to actually establish the direction, so we can go right into adding it to the view and then releasing it. Now we want to create the same kind of swipe gesture recognizer, but to recognize left swipes, and that will actually require us to specify the direction. Remember, swiping to the right is the default, but swiping to the left requires you to specify the direction. First, we'll, of course, start with Recognizer, our reference there, and take UI swipe gesture recognizer and allocate it again. And it with target self, action at selector. And once again, handle swipe from. This time, Xcode knows the name of it, even though we haven't yet defined it, simply because we used it before. Now we're going to establish the direction of the swipe recognizer. That we do this way. Direction equals UI swipe gesture direction left. Let's scroll up and take a look at that. So we're specifying a direction property with UI swipe gesture recognizer direction left. Now we can add that to the view and once again release it because it's no longer needed. So we've just initialized two swipe recognizers to handle left and right swipes and add them to the view. Now we need to ask the delegate if a gesture recognizer should receive an object representing a touch. And of course we want it to, so we will have it say yes. To do that, we add the gesture recognizer method, which is bool, because it returns a yes or a no. Gesture recognizer, UI gesture recognizer should receive touch. It already has UI touch right there ready for us. Put in a bracket and we return yes. We'll put in a blank line there. So this return yes lets the gesture recognizer examine the touch object. Now what happens in response to these tap gestures is what we need to code now. And that's the handle tap from and the handle swipe from. Let's do the handle tap from first. And for that, we type a void, handle tap from, find it like this, UI tap, gesture recognizer, self, settings. Scroll up a little. So in response to a tap gesture, it shows the settings modal view. And basically what we're doing is specifying what the handle tap from method does. In response to a tap gesture from UI tap gesture recognizer, the method uses settings to display the modal view. Now in response to a swipe gesture, we want it to change the speed. And in fact, it depends on the direction of the swipe, whether it's increasing or decreasing the speed. So we're going to put in our handle swipe from method here. Swipe gesture recognizer with recognizer. And we're going to start with a condition to determine the direction of the swipe. So if recognizer direction is UI swipe gesture recognizer direction left, close paren, what happens then? Well, if speed is less than or equal to k max speed, speed equals speed plus 2. So it increases the speed. Else, if speed greater than 0, speed is speed minus 2. So here we've done the handle swipe method. If the direction is to the left, the method reduces the animation speed. If not, which means the direction must be to the right, which is the default, the method increases the speed. And now we've entered our gestures into the MyPad World app, and we're ready to test them, which is definitely the next step before doing anything further.